Why do we misjudge people so often? We take smiles for kindness, confidence for truth, and silence for wisdom, and in doing so, we invite deception into our lives. Nietzsche believed that every human being is a text written in movements, habits, and hidden desires, and if we learn to read it, we free ourselves from illusion. Nietzsche often wrote of masks, not merely the carnival disguise, the deeper fabrications that men and women weave over their true selves. He saw human life as a theater where each person plays a part and yet cannot fully control the performance. The mask is an attempt at control, to appear stronger than one feels, kinder than one is, more noble than one dares to be. It is the armor against judgment, the painted face for social survival. But Nietzsche would insist that no mask can be worn perfectly forever. Even the most careful actor will betray himself, because the human spirit leaks through every crack. In the subtle twitch of the mouth when a rival speaks, in the way eyes narrow a fraction at an inconvenient truth, in the shift of the voice when speaking to someone perceived as lower in rank. These are fissures in the mask. A mask is designed for the gaze of others. Life is not a controlled stage. The script is constantly interrupted. Fatigue, boredom, sudden joy, irritation. These moments summon the real face to the surface. Nietzsche would tell us that our task is not to strip the mask violently, to watch patiently until it slips of its own accord. Observation must be practiced without hurry. To read a person, one must train the eye not only on their grand gestures, but on their smallest lapses. The mask is convincing during formal occasions, during introductions, and under the spotlight of attention. But reality is found in the seconds between, when vigilance falters, when the waiter is slow to bring their food, when they believe nobody is listening, when a child interrupts their important thought. In these instants, the unmasked soul peers out like a startled animal. Nietzsche would warn against naivety. People rarely lie to you outright in words. They lie in the persona they present. And unlike words, persona cannot be constructed without flaw. The mask is not merely falsehood. It is also a confession. It reveals by its very design what the wearer wishes you to believe. If a man strives too hard to appear fearless, you may suspect he trembles in secret. If a woman projects exaggerated sweetness, you may wonder what bitterness she hides beneath. The mask points to the face, just as a shadow points to the body casting it. We should also understand that the mask is not an evil in itself. In Nietzsche's view, it is a necessary element of social existence. Without masks, society would collapse into chaos. Civility requires a certain degree of performance. The human animal is too raw, too instinct-driven to live exposed at all times. But this necessity is precisely why the skill of reading the mask is so rare. Most people accept the surface because questioning it feels impolite, even dangerous. Nietzsche invites us to reject this comfort. To see clearly is to risk disrupting the false harmony we live within. The truth emerges most vividly under pressure. Nietzsche valued the test, a moment that confronts a person with something they cannot ignore or escape. In these moments, masks are harder to maintain. Anger, fear, desire, and triumph each have their own way of shattering the practiced image. To read someone instantly is not to rush judgment, but to know where to look when the strain comes. In a heated argument, does the person grow louder to dominate or quieter to plot? When faced with loss, do they cling desperately or accept with dignity? These responses are written not in their claims about themselves, but in the living proof of their reactions. Every mask is an artwork of the self, and like all art, it carries the signature of its creator. The brushstrokes betray the hand. The style betrays the era and the influences. The colors betray the mood of the one who painted it. If you watch closely, the mask becomes a map not only of what the person is, but of what they fear becoming. This is why Nietzsche's truth is so profound. The mask does not only hide, it tells you exactly where to look. When Nietzsche declared that character is fate, he was not speaking in the language of empty proverbs, but in the tone of a man who saw human beings as the sum of their repeated choices. To him, a single decision may be an accident, a coincidence, or a product of circumstance. But when a choice is repeated, when an action becomes a pattern, it reveals the very architecture of a soul. This is why, to understand a person, one must not be hypnotized by their extraordinary moments, but must instead look at the ordinary ones they enact again and again. Habits are not mere routines, they are declarations. A man who greets the morning with disciplined work has declared his allegiance to a certain order of life, just as one who begins the day in avoidance declares his loyalty to delay. Nietzsche would say that the true self is not found in dramatic confessions or poetic self-descriptions, in the almost invisible rituals that shape a life without conscious thought. In these repetitions, you find the spine of a person's destiny. To watch someone's habits is to watch their future being written in real time. Every repeated act is a brushstroke, and over the years, the painting becomes impossible to hide. A person who constantly chooses comfort over challenge is building a life that will retreat from its own potential. One who continually seeks out conflict is scripting a fate where peace is forever fleeting. We are, in this way, our own authors bound by the handwriting we never change. Nietzsche understood that character is not something we are born with in a fixed state, nor something we can alter on a whim. It is the product of sustained choice, and because sustained choice is rare, most lives unfold according to a predictable design. If you wish to read someone instantly, you must resist the temptation to be swayed by their speeches about themselves. Instead, follow their footprints through time. What do they return to when no one commands them? What is the rhythm they cannot break? This is the drumbeat of their life, and it marches them toward a destination they cannot easily escape. Nietzsche would have called this an expression of the eternal recurrence. Not in the metaphysical sense alone, but in the concrete sense that we live our lives in loops, and our loops are the road to our fate. Character, in this sense, is both liberating and damning. It liberates because those with strength and self-mastery will naturally walk toward a destiny that reflects their inner discipline. It damns because those enslaved by petty impulses or destructive appetites will be carried, by the same consistency, toward ruin. This is why Nietzsche warned that a man cannot simply wish for a new fate without first reshaping the character that drives him. To alter one's path, one must alter the habits that make up the self, a task as painful and rare as it is transformative. In studying another person, this insight becomes a tool of precision. The surface may be misleading, especially in moments of novelty or performance. People can behave in surprising ways when motivated by fear, desire, or curiosity. But the surprise fades quickly, and the deeper current of their character reasserts itself. That current is steady, even when the waves above are chaotic. A person might tell you they value truth, but if their habits show a pattern of convenient lies, you have seen their real commitment. They might claim to be courageous, but if their routines are carefully constructed to avoid discomfort, you have measured the real weight of their bravery. In this way, Nietzsche's maxim cuts through pretense. To read someone's fate is to read their habits. To read their habits is to read their character. And to read their character is to see the invisible contract they have signed with their own future. Nietzsche's philosophy circles endlessly around the idea of the will to power, the deep, unspoken drive that moves every human being. It is not merely the hunger for domination, nor a crude desire for control over others, but the impulse to expand, to assert, to shape the world according to one's own values. This will, Nietzsche would say, speaks long before the tongue does, and far louder than any argument or self-description. If you wish to read someone instantly, you must watch the silent conversation their body has with reality, for here is where the will to power writes its script. Every person enters a room with an unspoken claim. You can see it in the way they occupy space. The confident do not ask for permission to stand where they wish. Their posture affirms their right to be there. The timid fold inward, taking up as little ground as possible, as though apologizing for their existence. These silent negotiations reveal more about their inner life than any polite exchange could. Nietzsche understood that even the humblest gestures are often covert declarations of rank, strength, or submission. A man may speak of humility while unconsciously arranging himself at the head of the table. A woman may claim indifference to status while subtly measuring herself against every other presence in the room. Words are malleable and can be dressed for any occasion. The body's movements, however, spring from deeper instincts and are less easily disguised. The will to power leaks out in the pacing of steps, in the firmness of a handshake, in the steadiness or restlessness of the gaze. This is why Nietzsche placed little trust in verbal confessions. A person can swear loyalty, feign affection, or simulate respect, but their gestures will tell you where their allegiance truly lies. Watch how they position themselves when a figure of authority enters. Do they lean forward, seeking favor? Do they stiffen, ready to challenge? Do they withdraw, conceding the field without a word? Each response is an unspoken announcement of the individual's relationship to power. The will to power is also visible in the handling of objects, not just people. Observe the way a person interacts with the tools of their trade, the arrangement of their workspace, the care or disregard with which they handle their possessions. One who sees the world as raw material for their will shapes it with deliberate precision. One who feels powerless lets the world dictate terms, surrendering order to chance. Nietzsche would have us see these details not as trivial habits, but as the tangible marks of a person's spiritual temperature. Even silence itself is a language of power. There is the silence of those who fear to speak, and the silence of those who have no need to. A pause in speech can be a retreat or a conquest, depending on the will that governs it. When two people fall quiet, the one who remains untroubled by the stillness is often the one who holds the greater ground. In such moments, words are unnecessary. The balance of power has already been declared without a syllable. For Nietzsche, the will to power is not simply about reading strength or weakness in others. It is about discerning the unique pattern in which their drive expresses itself. Some seek power through direct confrontation, testing themselves against rivals. Others pursue it through subtlety, weaving influence without ever appearing to command. Some gain it by creating beauty or truth so compelling that the world bends to acknowledge it. Regardless of the form, the movement is the same, an expansion outward from the self, a reaching toward mastery. If you wish to read someone instantly, attend to the unguarded moments when the will to power surfaces in pure form. When they are denied something they believe they deserve, do they fight, adapt, or resign? When they are offered more than they expected, do they reach further or shrink back? When challenged, do they defend their ground, abandon it, or redefine it to suit themselves? In such moments, speech becomes irrelevant, for the will to power is speaking in the oldest language known to humanity. The language of action, stance, and the silent architecture of presence. For Nietzsche, suffering was not a mere misfortune to be avoided or pitied. It was the crucible in which the human soul is formed. Pain, loss, humiliation, and struggle carve themselves into the body and spirit as surely as a sculptor's chisel marks stone. Every individual carries these imprints, though most would prefer to hide them beneath polite expressions or practiced ease. To read someone instantly, one must learn to see not only the surface they present, but the faint etchings left by every trial they have endured. These markings are not always visible to the untrained eye, yet once you know where to look, they are as unmistakable as fingerprints. Suffering changes posture. It can bend a person forward, as though the weight of remembered hardships still hangs from their shoulders. It can make one stand too straight, not from confidence, but from a stubborn refusal to be bowed again. You can see it in the way they walk. Whether their steps are tentative, scanning for danger before it arrives, or deliberate, as though each step is an act of defiance against whatever tried to stop them before. Nietzsche would insist that every movement carries the ghost of the struggles that preceded it. The voice, too, bears the trace of suffering. Sometimes it trembles, even when speaking of ordinary things, because it has been shaped by too many moments of fear or loss. Sometimes it becomes sharpened, every word precise and edged, forged in the fires of conflict. Other times, it is slow and deliberate, a voice that has learned the value of silence and the weight of speech. Tone is not merely a matter of personality. It is the echo of battles fought in solitude. Even the eyes cannot escape the mark of suffering. Some eyes look out with a watchfulness that never fades, trained by years of needing to anticipate danger. Others shine with a kind of hard-earned gentleness, a compassion born from knowing firsthand the depth of pain. Still others carry a distant, inward gaze, the look of one who has walked through despair and emerged with a quiet, unshakable knowledge that most people will never touch. Nietzsche believed that truth lived in such gazes, for they are immune to the petty illusions that occupy those who have never been broken. Suffering also shapes the way a person relates to others. Those who have endured much may be slow to trust, not out of cynicism alone, but from the memory of how trust was once betrayed. Others become unexpectedly open, as if their own pain has softened them toward the pain of others. Still others grow cold and unreachable, sealing themselves behind an armor built from years of necessity. Each response is a survival strategy, each leaves its own signature in gestures, speech, and silences. The influence of suffering is not always heavy or grim. Paradoxically, it can create an air of lightness in those who have passed through great trials and found themselves still standing. Freed from the small anxieties that dominate the untested, they move with a certain calm detachment, as though life has already shown its sharpest teeth, and they are no longer impressed by its smaller threats. Nietzsche valued this kind of strength, the strength not of avoiding pain, but of having integrated it into one's being until it becomes indistinguishable from one's character. Reading the fingerprints of suffering requires patience and humility. One cannot rush to conclusions, for pain is a complex teacher and leaves different lessons in different students. Two people may endure the same ordeal, yet one becomes gentle while the other becomes harsh. One becomes fearless while the other becomes cautious. The mark of suffering is not in the event itself, but in the transformation it produces. The reader must watch closely, discerning whether the changes they see are signs of growth, scars of avoidance, or a mixture of both. In the end, the presence of suffering is not a weakness to exploit nor a flaw to pity, but a key to understanding the architecture of a soul. It is through these invisible fingerprints that you can trace the hidden history of a person, the unseen battles they have fought, and the quiet terms on which they have come to live with the world. To read another human being is not to collect gossip or to master a set of mechanical tricks. It is to walk through the terrain of their being with eyes, unclouded by wishful thinking. Nietzsche's truths strip away the illusions that make us lazy interpreters of one another. Every mask, however artful, carries the fingerprints of its wearer. Every pattern of choice writes the outline of a destiny. The will to power speaks in postures and silences, long before it utters a word. Suffering leaves its quiet engravings on the body, the voice, and the gaze. In seeing these truths, you learn to distinguish between what a person wishes to be seen as and what they inevitably reveal. You stop mistaking surface politeness for virtue, practiced confidence for courage, or polished speech for wisdom. You begin to see human beings not as isolated moments, but as living histories, each movement, tone, and habit part of a continuous story written long before you met them. This kind of vision is not for the faint-hearted. It demands patience, precision, and the courage to abandon the comforting lie that people are exactly who they claim to be. Nietzsche's philosophy gives no promise that such seeing will make you happier, but it will make you freer. And in freedom, there is the rarest of powers, the power to live without illusion, to meet the human soul as it truly is, and to decide with clear eyes how you will answer it.